Good evening to all of you. Good evening, thank you. So my name is Jonathan Anderson. I'm the new Eugene and Jan Peterson Associate Professor of Theology and the Arts here at Regent. And if you're a regular here, or this is your first time here, or somewhere in between, a very warm welcome to you tonight. Regent is a place where quite a lot of us are devoted to thinking and working seriously or playfully at the intersection between theology and the arts. Eugene Peterson, who's the namesake of my chair, once spoke about theology and the arts in these terms. He spoke about theology, the domain of theology, as operating in the life of a Christian or in the life of a community as a kind of magnetic North Pole. And the worlds of the arts as operating like a magnetic South Pole, each with their own logics and their own powers in the ordering and reordering of our lives. Our lives, our perceptions, our affections. And in a reductive sense, it's possible to see these polarities as oppositional to each other. We're familiar with that way of these polarities going. But for Eugene, and I think for a lot of us, these two poles generate a kind of electromagnetic field in which serious thinking about embodied creaturely life can unfold in a generative way. And so in this sense, theology and the arts is less about joining two things together than it is about living and working in a more singular field that's highly magnetized with, I suppose, what we could call theoaesthetic energy. My vision and hope for the arts program here at Regent is to foster precisely this kind of living and working, one that operates as a kind of hub of energy, and a field that is generative between these, within the fields between theology and the arts. And tonight we have the great pleasure of gathering to celebrate one really fantastic instantiation of this kind of energy. We're here to celebrate the release of the third volume of the Pace Journal. It's a beautiful journal about artistic making, dedicated to the practice of slow living, as it says on the cover. And to invite us into this work, it's my great pleasure to introduce the editor-in-chief of PACE and a current THM student here at Regent, Ryan Michael Chin. Please join me in welcoming him tonight.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that introduction. I think it's really so cool that we're able to embody in this place what we study, what we think about, what we read about. I'm so incredibly grateful for this moment right now. To have all of us gathered here around Pace Journal and the stories it seeks to pay attention to is something that we at Pace are always so humbled by. And many people have come together to make this evening happen. And before I speak more about Pace and Volume 3, I'd just like to spend a couple of moments thanking the people without whom tonight wouldn't have been possible. So first of all, I'd like to thank some people who aren't with us this evening. I'd like to thank the Pace team, Alvin Tan, Denise Tan, and Sharon Ng. For those of you who don't know, they are the beating heart of Pace. Alvin, Denise, and Sharon have worked so committedly. I don't know if that's a real word. There was a red line under it on Word, but I'm going to stick with it. I like how it sounds. They've worked so committedly over the past few years with PACE. Now, because of time zone differences throughout much of this past year, the weekly PACE meetings have taken place at 10:30 p.m. for Sharon and Denise in Singapore and 6:30 a.m. for Alvin in the US. They've never complained, though I must say there have been noticeable yawns and some missed Zoom meetings, myself included. Yeah. Despite the trouble of time zones, right now 2 of them are literally on the other side of the world. They have done so much. They have done everything from literally crossing T's and dotting I's in Pace Journal. They've done everything from processing orders to making sure orders are delivered. Pace would not be able to do what it does today without them. In addition to them, a special mention is due to my mother, Georgina, at the back. Hey, Mom. A special mention is due to her for being a great supporter of Pace, willing to literally cross continents to be here tonight. 16-hour flight, but with tailwind, 13 hours, so good for Mom. She brought copies of Volume 3 with her tonight, which means that we all get to save on shipping costs. Thank you, Mom. So can we please give another round of applause to Alvin, Denise, Sharon, and Mom. You can call her Georgina or Mrs. Chen. Mom's for me and my brothers. Secondly, I'd like to acknowledge all the contributors to Volume 3. The contributors, you are the muscles that animate Pace and give it life and motion. And there are too many of you to name, and only one of you here with us this evening. But please know that tonight it is your work that we appreciate and honor. You have written your stories, you have told your secrets, and you have articulated your experiences through Volume 3. Everything from the artfully crafted sentence to the rich rhyme of poetry and even the tender carve of brushstrokes. Our contributors are pastors and poets, scholars and students, writers and workers, children and parents. Our contributors are our friends, and this evening we thank them. So please join me as we thank our contributors. And last but not least, I would like to thank everyone at Regent College who has worked so earnestly, that is a real word, I checked, there's no red underline for that one, who has worked earnestly behind the scenes to bring this evening together. You are the foundation upon which everything this evening stands. I'd like to recognize the Regent Communications team, including Dr. Jeremy Stewart, Richard Wu, Genevieve Althea, where's Rich? Rich is over there. Richard Wu, Genevieve Althea, Fong Xue Ting, as well as Kim Bolt of the Regent Bookstore, who have also strongly advocated for Pace, giving us a space in the very busy and very full, as we all know, Regent calendar. And I would also like to acknowledge the countless helpers who, let's say, 30 minutes ago were heaving and hoeing chairs and couches to set up this room. I'd like to thank the people who are managing hospitality, the people who are currently managing audio and visual equipment, and the people who will soon be presenting excerpts from Volume 3. So I'd like to thank Caleb Berberick, Carter Thompson, Fong Xue Ting again, Hope Teggart, Dr. Jonathan Anderson, Christina Eichenroth, Sandra Lee and Sandra Park, Stephanie Loli, Stephen Bell, Steven Gomez, and Matthew Onishi. So please join me as we thank them for this evening. For the sake of unfinished stories and the one who writes them with us. This was the ethos that Pace began with. And this publishing ethos speaks of a hope to listen well to our stories, recognizing that they unfold in uncertain and mysterious ways. And it speaks to the hope that as we listen well to our stories, we can catch the echoes of God in the songs of our lives, tracing his fingerprints along the paths we tread. We've intended to do that through every iteration of Pace Journal, and we've worked towards that same end with Volume 3. Each iteration has its unique thematic core. Volume 1's was journeys, Volume 2's was intimacy, and Volume 3's is wonder. In Volume 3, we hope to explore the theme of wonder as we ask the question of what it means to wonder in our Christian faith, both in the valleys low and the mountains high, both the wandering that brings pain to the body and the wandering that brings light to the eyes. This evening, you will experience multiple facets of wonder as we encounter our contributors' explorations in thoughtful writing, beautiful poetry, and considered art. But before we experience their work, I hope you would just allow me a few more minutes to consider the idea of wonder as it appears in the biblical story. Over the past few months, a single scene in the biblical story has been turning over in my mind. And the scene is that of the Emmaus Road. In the final chapter of the Gospel of Luke, we find two disciples on the Emmaus Road, taking the 11-kilometer journey out of the city of Jerusalem towards the town of Emmaus. Now, there was certainly much for them to talk about. Jesus, the prophet, had just been crucified and buried just a few days ago. But now there were rumors of an empty tomb and murmurs that angel voices were claiming a resurrection. Now, there's no doubt that to these two disciples, they had much to talk about on this 3-hour walk through the Judean foothills. And we can only imagine the questions that were echoing in the halls of their mind, the doubts that their lips gave life to. Was what we saw real? Was what we heard real? Who is he? Who was he? What do we do now? Now, what happens next in the story is perhaps one of my favorite moments in all the gospel accounts. Now, with a surprising grace that many of us may be reluctant to believe in, to these wandering wanderers, Christ himself appears. Jesus Christ meets them in their wandering. Now, the journeying disciples, however, they don't yet recognize him. And as the gospel account continues, we learn that Jesus walks the remainder of the journey with the two of them. And that evening, as they break bread at their destination in the village of Emmaus, the disciples finally recognize Jesus, and Jesus disappears. Now, there's a humbling beauty in this scene. Amidst the disorientation of all that has happened and is happening in these disciples' lives, Christ appears. And Christ walks the remainder of the journey with them. And as he shares the road with them, he gives to them what is perhaps the most richest of all gifts, the gift of his own presence. Now, our tapestries of life are woven with a multitude of threads of wonder. There are dark patches of doubt and disbelief, and there are bright patterns of joy and vitality. But it seems that neither wonder is beyond our God. In Christ's own words, I am with you always to the very end of the age. All of us have, do, and will walk our own walks of wonder. Now, I've walked walks of wonder with many of you in this room. Walks that have been punctuated by unending question marks, and walks that have been pierced by the brilliance of sunbeams. He was there on our walks. He is here on our walks. And he will be there on the walks we are yet to take. He is merciful enough to be with us as we weave threads of painful wonder, and extravagant enough to join us as we sow seams of sweet wonder. It appears that we, his creation, we, his children, we, his beloved, are welcomed to wonder. And so this evening, I would like to end this opening address with a following invitation. An invitation that we can confidently believe is the disposition of our God towards us. My friends, welcome to wonder. Thank you.
So we'll have a few people read or help to draw us into the kind of work that is going on in this issue of Pace. So to kick us off, reading an essay from Volume 3 is Regent student Stephanie Loli. Please join me in welcoming her.
Hi, I'm Stephanie, and I'll be reading an essay by my dear, dear friend, Maria Clara. Most of you know her. So Maria Clara is a biologist, and she has a vocational interest with creation care. This piece that she wrote is all about the hope we can find in God's stewardship of the land. I'll be reading 2 sections of the piece. So for the first section of The Land Endures. One of my most vivid memories from childhood is that of my grandmother saying this short prayer before a meal. For this bread and this fellowship, I thank you, Lord. My grandmother's house did not have a dining room. Rather, it had a big kitchen with a long table where we would prepare the salad and talk to her while she cooked the main meal. Once the meal was done, we would all sit around the table, usually sweating from the humid heat in Rio de Janeiro and very hungry. But we would not dare to take a bite until that short prayer was said. The moment before a meal always felt reverent for my grandmother, the matriarch of the family. As she sat down, did the sign of the cross, closed her eyes, and then said those few solemn words. Over the years, I did not foster my own habit of saying grace before a meal. Yet, when I came to British Columbia for the first time to live on a farm for 6 months, I desired to kindle this habit grew in me. Now, the second section. During my time at seminary, I joined the garden group at my school. The growing season in Pacific Northwest always seems short and busy. We'd spend months waiting, dreaming, and preparing until finally the rain had ceased enough for a few days of sunlight to show up and let us spend some time outside planting. I love to see the garden come alive throughout the late spring and early summer months. What looks barren soon shows signs of little sprouts of arugula, radish, and kale pushing against the shell of their seeds. As the summer warms up, more variety in color, size, and texture is added to the garden. Trellis tomato plants surrounded by basil and parsley, butternut squash and acorn squash covering a whole bed, and marigold and sunflowers in all their glory, attracting beneficial insects and keeping the harmful ones away. I am always amazed at the bounty that can be contained in our 3 small 7 by 5 raised garden beds. One of my favorite moments of the season is when we get to share our harvest with the rest of the community. We fill a table in the middle of the school's atrium with our recent harvest and watch as people come curious to see what's going on. Why is there a window table with vegetables in the school? In the school's most crowded place, they wonder. And where did they come from? Sometimes they can tell from afar. There are also herbs as the smell of mint and lavender spreads over the atrium. Some people stop by just to chat, and Mai ended up taking one snap pea as a snack to humor us. Yet, after that first bite, when their eyes open in surprise to the freshness and sweetness of the peas, they cannot resist taking more. This year, something curious happened in our garden. At the end of the last season, as we prepared the bed for winter, we noticed a very small bunch of parsley in the garden. We covered it with dry leaves as we were doing with the rest of the beds and thought the parsley would just decompose back into the soil. We had a hard winter in British Columbia with weeks of uncommon amounts of snow. And again, in February, when I was achingly waiting for signs of crocuses and snowdrops as banners for the end of winter, we had another dump of snow. Yet, in March, when my fellow gardeners and I went to check on our beds, there was our little parsley plant growing strong. Once June and warmer weather came, it had become a bush. We took a huge bucket of parsley back to school and shared it, amidst laughter and amazement, with the rest of the community. Even knowing now that parsley is considered a hardy overwintering plant does not dampen the delight I felt to find a plant we had abandoned and forgotten about thriving. I think it is in the nature of creation to amaze us, and I hope to never become dull to its wonder. This experience gave depth to that old Bible story of the year of Jubilee in Leviticus 25. God told the Israelites to let the ground rest every 7 years. They were to stop working, to not plant anything, to just let the ground bring up its own fruit to sustain an entire population. I cannot imagine this not fostering, testing, and molding hearts of deep trust and surrender to a God who is the creator and who is presently caring for his creation.
Thank you, Stephanie. In addition to written works, each issue of PACE also features several visual artworks, and we have the pleasure to talk to one of the artists responsible for, or one of the artists featured in this third volume, Regent student Fong Xue Ting. Fong Xue Ting. Come on up here. Please help me in welcoming her. Xue Ting, hi.
Hi.
So good to have you here, and so good to see your work in this issue of PACE. And I want to just talk through it with you a bit. And there will be an image of the work on the screen there so that you all can share in it. So this is a work called Wonder and Wonder. So the topic for the journal, this issue, is wonder,
Yes.
and you have doubled that.
yes.
Tell us a bit about the title of this work, and
Yeah.
tell us a bit about the work. What is going on here?
Okay, so for the title of the work, it's called Wonder and Wonder. And the first time that Ryan spoke to me about PACE Journal, he mentioned that the theme of PACE was about wonder. At least this volume was about wonder. And when he had told me that, I thought about just the theme of wonder and how wonder can be like two very distinct types of wonder. One wonder would be the wonder of really beholding the glory of God and that intimacy that we can have with God. But at the same time, there can also be times in our life where we wonder at where God is, and we wonder what He's doing. I think when Ryan approached me with this theme, it was about a year ago, and I resonated quite strongly with the theme, and that is also the reason why I decided to create this art piece. So for the art piece itself, you can see two figures. They are of the same person, but one of them is kneeling in anguish, and the other is in a state of beholding God. I think when I first started reading theology, when I first started digging deeper into Christian faith, for me that was like the experience that I had, really like being able to behold God, being able to delight in God. But at the same time, there have also been times in my life where I am the second person that is kneeling, and that is just sorrowful and unable to really see where God is. So yeah, that's the two types of wonder, and that's why I've named the piece Wonder and Wonder. Yeah. Mm.
And they read as the same figure in two different moments, and that corresponds with what you've just said.
Yeah.
But the way that you have constructed them together also, in a way, links them into a single figure or a single structure in the ways that the angles of the legs and the foot sort of lead into the upper figure lead into the lower figure, and so there is these are maybe two moments or two states, but also a kind of maybe there's a simultaneity to them, or a kind of a thinking and feeling in two directions at once. Is that you want to riff on that a bit?
Yeah. So this image kind of just came to my mind when I thought about the two sides of wonder. But yes, it is the same figure, and the reason why it does kind of I did want to capture that there is both highs and lows. I mean, in our walk, and the figure that is actually kneeling, although it takes up a smaller space in the picture, but it's in front of the figure that is beholding God. I wanted to show that both points are really part of the Christian journey. You can't really have one without the other, I think. Yeah, and there's also possible. It's also possible for us to be sorrowful and yet always rejoicing. I think that's something that I wanted to capture.
The way you've handled the faces of these figures is quite striking to me. With the upper figure rendered in quite a bit of detail, but without an eye, and that doesn't suggest to me sort of eyelessness, but that a kind of open-endedness, so that there is a looking up, a looking down, closing of the eyes, looking at us. It suggests sort of open-ended possibilities there. But the face of the lower figure is dissolving, melting, distorting in a way that is very, very evocatively suggests kind of not a multiplicity or an open-endedness, or maybe even a too open-ended or something like that, in the sense that this lower figure can't just turn his head. It's not just a matter of being misoriented. It's a matter of sort of being faceless in this moment, or something along those lines. You want to say anything about the handling of the faces of these two figures?
Yeah, so I will say that the face was not originally in my first idea, but as I drew it, I just decided to, I experimented. I thought about making his the face of the bottom figure melt, because I wanted to show, in a sense, the gravity of the emotions that the person is experiencing. It's not always easy to just think your way out to a better situation. Sometimes circumstances are just bad, and you have to be able to wrestle with that. And I think with the melting of the face, it also shows that it's not as easy as sometimes just lifting your head to look in another direction. Yeah, so that's something that I wanted to convey. As for the lack of the eye, that's actually something that I did want to leave open-ended, because for the viewer who is actually looking at the artwork, I think I wanted them to have their own understanding of what does it mean to actually be looking at the dove, which represents God. And so that's what I decided to do. I did try and draw an eye in at first, but it looked a bit too directed, and I wanted there to be that interaction, with the piece.
I gather that this is at some level quite a personal work. It's about personal experience, personal prayer or lack of prayer, or personal wonder and wonder. And in that context, it does strike me that you've chosen an unclothed male figure for both of these. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, this was actually one of the first questions that someone asked me, why a male and why is he not wearing clothes? So yeah, my response to that was it's because I wanted to show that this is not just my journey, although it was kind of like formed by my own personal experiences. But I was thinking more about the lines, more on the lines of like God and Adam, and how we as people relate to God. Yeah, so that was the reason why I chose a male figure, just because I think that it's like God and humanity. Yeah, that's what I wanted to represent through the art piece. And the reason why he's not wearing clothes was because when I thought about giving him clothes, a few questions came to mind. Firstly, I have to think about what type of clothes, what style, and like where, where, like which century or even modern day clothes, like it would change the feeling of the image. And I did want there to be a kind of like rawness in the relationship that is conveyed between him and God, that he's just coming as he is. So without style or without any external coverings. That's what I thought.
So I've asked you mostly about the figures, but I'm also quite interested in the spaces that you've constructed here. Tell us about these spaces for this double figure.
Yeah, so the space where the figure is beholding God is kind of like a cosmos. It is like space. To me, when I think about a visual representation of what it means to know God, like I think space is one of the first things that come to mind because of just how big God is and how mysterious and how inscrutable, knowing God sometimes feels. That is the kind of image that I wanted to portray with the galaxy. At the bottom with the Black River, I just wanted a way to kind of symbolize something that feels very stagnant in comparison. Yeah, so that's why it's mostly flat. There's not much going on at the bottom, and it's just black and silent. So that's what the emotion that I wanted to convey. Yeah.
It's black and stagnant, but you've also created a constellation there as well. Say something about that.
Yeah, so if you look at the water surface, there's actually lots of fallen stars, and the stars have been torn as well. Actually, one of the things that I was kind of wrestling with in my own personal life when Ryan asked me to about doing this piece was actually disappointment. And I think how a lot of the times in our lives we might feel disappointed about things that did not go as we hoped, and I wanted a way to kind of symbolize that. So the stars have been torn. They are symbolic of dead dreams and losses as well. Yeah, so if you look at the galaxy, there are stars in there, but on the water surface, the stars have fallen, and they are actually, they're torn. Yeah.
That aspect of this work is very evocative to me. That you could have, I suppose, created a constellation in the water by way of reflection of the stars, but no, they're fallen stars that and disappointments that nevertheless form another kind of sky, another kind of space, another kind of even intelligible constellation. And in that same space, you've given us not the dove, but a feather of the dove. There is this kind of mirroring of these two spaces, even in the darkness, stagnancy, fallenness.
Yeah.
That's quite wonderful.
Yeah, so the feather is symbolic of God's presence, as is the dove, but the feather is a lot more inconspicuous. So I think in times where we might be journeying through disappointment or just journeying through suffering, the presence of God is still with us, but sometimes we don't have the strength to behold it. Yeah, we don't have the strength to lift our head, and that's okay. He's still with us. Yeah, and I think one of the things that I was wrestling with at that point in time was actually a major faith crisis. So I did want that feather to kind of show that even though I was wrestling through, all these thoughts about a faith that I love and I grew up with, there was still all of this that I had to work through, but God was still with me. Yeah, so that was.
One last observation that strikes me about this image is the placement of the horizon line. The horizon line not only running through the lower figure, it's a low horizon line that aligns with, the head and heart of that lower figure. But horizon lines, in images, if you kind of think of the cone of vision, to look down means you have a high horizon line. To look up lowers the horizon line within the frame. And to some extent, you have placed us as viewers with an upward gaze, somewhat reminiscent of the top figure rather than the bottom figure, acknowledging, in some ways, placing the horizon line at the lower figure. So we very much acknowledge, in some ways everything pivots around that lower figure, but you've implicitly tipped our head up to look upward, which is also very evocative about this image. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
So actually, I hadn't really thought about it until you said.
You were thinking at a visual level. It doesn't have to be at a verbal level.
Yeah. I think when I sketched it out, very roughly at first, I did think about like how I would place that. But I think this was what worked for me because. Yeah, I have to think a bit more about that. But I think if it were a bit higher, then the water, because of how dark it is, would just overpower the image. Yeah, just going from a visual perspective. So if there was too much of that, it might overpower the image, and yeah, that's how I actually.
Which is why you're graciously tipping our head back. Look up, guys. Look upward.
Yeah.
Xue Ting, thank you so much for talking to me, and thank you so much for your artwork.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, Regent student Steven Gomez will read 2 poems from Volume 3. Join me in welcoming him.
Well, good evening. Is this all right? Is it all right? Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to emphasize is that these are not my poems. These are 2 poems by 2 different Singaporean poets. Closer. There we go. Oh, there we go. Now you can hear me. There you go. Yeah. Well, the first thing to emphasize, just to repeat that, was these are not my poems. They are 2 poems by 2 different Singaporean poets. And when Ryan asked if I would sort of represent them and read their work, I was certainly pleased to do that. And even more pleased when I read the poems and discovered how good they were. And in encountering them, I discovered something which Xue Ting has already illustrated for us and represented visually. These are the sort of literary resonance of this idea of these 2 kinds of wonder, the painful kind of wonder and the sweet wonder, as Ryan said earlier. So this first poem is by Christian Yo. Christian Yo wrote this poem let me just double check the bio. Wrote this poem after meditating, after spending some months teaching at a school in Lebanon for Syrian refugees. This poem is called Elegy. The earth shattered with ash. We walked on brick, and I imagined the lick, the flash, the sudden hedge-road orange of flapping tents become mandarins. You offered me water. I declined. I had my own, and I wasn't sure if you did. I offered you numbers to call, said your home would be back in 3 weeks, so wait. The road unearthed with dreams, the sky unwound with femurs, the water mottled with green, the rivers broken like fevers. In the end, I bought my ticket when the price dipped online. Then it was ash, it was orange, it was dreams, it was a fever of dreams. It was femurs and fevers of dreams. It was femurs and fevers of green. It was a year in the blip of rumors, and though I asked a possible God why he sleeps well and still you don't, I am now here, and you are still you. The second poem is by Jonathan Shan, and he wrote it inspired by C.S. Lewis, Gerard Manley Hopkins, and meditating on color and what color is. This is called What Color is the Sun? What color is the sun? A barren eye can make no claim. Perhaps a vicarious orange or yellow, so flamed at the perch of a day's beginning or end. Then it is a pink, sandwiched between blue evening and inky dusk. We know the sun only by its making a color more a color. Leaves gleaming a greater green, primroses a weaker shade of pale, spots of cadmium in the bushes, and the glistening of receding snow. Rays of light shoot out as a twinkle. Tracing back the beams to a searing hot white, one sees of the sun the grace of its radiance, known only by what it reveals. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to invite Ryan up and do a bit of Q&A with him. And this is Q&A that I'd love to invite all of you into. So questions based on what we've already heard or seen, or about the journal generally. So I'll kick us off, but you can kind of be brewing and stewing and preparing your questions. So I'd love to hear, thank you, by the way. It's really a very beautiful journal. Those poems. Oh, God. So thank you. A question to kick us off with, I'd love to hear about the name of Pace Journal. What do you want to say about that?
I was preparing for questions, and that's not a question I prepared for. Gosh, let's see. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. This is so
no,
bad.
That's okay.
I'm having a mind blank. I should know this. I think pace as a word, the word itself, is quite a kind word, and I think it's a gentle word. And I think it represents the kind of spirituality, the art making, and the life living, and the theology experiencing or theology practicing that pace or the writing and the artwork holds dear. So there is this almost hard to explain, just natural beauty to the word. I think it's a very nice word. Pace. You can try whispering pace. You know, it's just there's just something about it. And I think as an idea as well, it kind of rebels against this idea of competition, of overwhelming intensity, and it slows us down to kind of catch those glimpses of God. Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons for asking it is that it's so suggestive of a name, and it does several different things. It's multivalent in a way that, like, I found myself kind of simultaneously, just in reading the title of the journal, sort of feeling like attend to the pace of things, attend to your own pace in relation to those things. And that is both like slow your pace, brother, and also pick up the pace, man. At any rate, it is this sort of really suggestive title. And in moving through this volume, the work itself plays with a different kind of pacing of life and of thinking and of feeling of the making. So it's quite evocative.
I could actually add maybe something onto that. Part of the inspiration of the name Pace and really the ethos of the journal it was inspired partly by work that's already been done at Regent College. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Godspeed documentary by Matt and Julie Canlis, I think that's right. I came across that documentary, and they referenced an idea by a Japanese theologian, Kosuke Koyama, who talks about the 3-mile-an-hour God, and the God who walks at 3 miles an hour, which is the average human walking speed. And I think that kind of plays into some of the inspiration of what does it look like to attend to that slower pace in the stories, in the artwork, to kind of walk at the pace of life, which sometimes may be much slower than we sometimes think. Yeah.
Each of these volumes has a different theme, one-word theme.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about how you arrive at those themes. Does the work arrive first and gather around a theme, or vice versa, or something else?
Yeah, these are tough questions, Jonathan. These are the questions that are going to make us look much more messy than we are. So how it usually happens is, just think of a word. Honestly, I just think of a word. The team, we were in a meeting the other day, and they said, Ryan, we got to start working on volume 4. And I was like, I know. And they were like, do we have a theme? And I'm like, if you look at the Google Drive, I've just put a word for volume 4. And that's kind of how it happens. We just kind of throw words out, and we get to talk to people. And there's this kind of, divine way in which the work comes together, and it's appropriate. Like with Xue Ting's work, the theme of wonder, we hear how it was appropriate for her time of life. And that was not something that we premeditated. It wasn't, we're going to do the theme of wonder, and then we're going to reach out to this Singaporean artist. It just kind of unfolds, and I guess I have to say that there is a serendipitous grace in it, that these words kind of pop up, and it just happens. I'm sorry, that's not a good answer, but that's the truth.
These are really good answers.
That's the truth.
Perfect. I do want to pause and give open the room to questions, if there's any here. Yeah, if you just want to maybe stand and project.
Hey Ryan, how has being one of the editor-in-chief, how has being the editor-in-chief and running this magazine transformed your life, the way you live your faith on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'm just going to repeat it for anyone online. So Sungtek was asking, how has my role as editor-in-chief transformed my own life? One of the surprising things that happens with Pace is because it takes so long to work on it, it's usually a yearly cycle. We'll end up working on some pieces that we only start revisiting close to launch. So I realized that there was a contributor that I was emailing, and the last time I had emailed him was literally November last year. So it's been a long time since the work has been submitted. And there is this beauty in coming back to the work with fresh eyes. And I've felt like as editor-in-chief that I get to encounter these stories as a reader. And I think these stories touch me in so many ways. And there are so many different stories and so many different pieces of art. But, you know, it transforms my life, I think, the way I hope it would transform anyone else's life, in that when you come to it, you hear someone, and you hear someone's walk with God, you hear someone's faith, and in just listening to someone else, you're touched, and you're moved, and you notice things that you didn't notice before, and you learn. So I learn and I relearn at every point along the journey of sitting down with people and editing for hours and saying, maybe we should try this word instead of this word. But I also am moved when I come back to the piece. And again, like for this launch, rereading the pieces, or even listening to Xue Ting's artwork, or hearing the poetry be read. I experience for Volume 3, a new way of understanding wonder and wonder. I'm sorry, I hope that was a good answer.
No, yeah.
I don't know.
It's great,
I'm
perfect.
just, yeah.
Yeah. Other questions from the floor? So, if people are interested in publishing in the journal, do you have a submission process, or is it primarily a kind of invitation curation project?
So no, we definitely are welcoming to all submissions, and we have a submission kind of page on our website, which leads to an email address. And you know, we are. Gosh, I don't know why I'm struggling so much with these questions. I'm sorry, guys. Maybe I need a script. I can only handle a script. Yeah, we are welcome to people wanting to submit them. In our experience over the past 3 volumes, which is now close to 60 pieces, 100,000 words, which is incredible when you think about it. In our experience, most of what has happened is we've reached out to people, and it's been through friends or through connections, and it's been quite a natural process. But we have had submissions, and as kind of a young publication, we are starting to receive more submissions, and we are definitely open. And I think one of the precious things about Pace is if you look through our contributor list, we have such a wide group of contributors. And just now when I mentioned, you know, everyone from scholars to students, pastors to poets, we really have this wonderful mix. And if you look at the Volume 3 kind of content page, we actually got permission from the C.S. Lewis estate to republish a bit of Narnia. But at the same time, we have contributions from grad students, right? At the same time, we have contributions from, my mind is blank right now, I'll think of something, from full-time writers. We have contributions from poets. And I think that's something really special. We want to listen to all these different stories and all these different contributions. And so, yes, we are open to contributions from anywhere and everywhere. Yeah.
I would love to hear how this journal started. What prompted it? What was the initial spark?
I've prepared for this one. I can do this. I can do this. So I don't have a script though, but I did. Gosh, I'm just going to answer the question. So when I was in seminary, I serendipitously came across a couple of writers, including Frederick Buechner, Thomas Merton, Henry Nguyen, Kosuke Koyama, the Godspeed documentary. And as I experienced these ways of thinking and these ways of living, I was very touched. It was a season of my life when I was discovering or rediscovering spirituality. What does it mean to be Christian? What does the Christian life really look like in the everyday? And these people were great companions, And so I asked the very simple question, what does it look like then to be part of that, to engage with that and to advocate that? And so it was kind of silly, but I did a mock-up. I did a design mock-up, and I sent it to a professor of the seminary that I was at. I sent it to a very close friend, and they both said, looks good. And then I said, okay, let's do this. So we registered a company, and then we started asking people to write, and then we printed it, and now it's been close to 4 years. So it was this very kind of, it's kind of like how the themes for the journals come up. It just kind of happened, and we ran with it, and there were people who were supportive, and people joined the team along the process, and Regent is partnering this evening, and it just kind of unfolded. But it was that spark of what does it look like to live a kind of earthy spirituality, a grounded spirituality, inspired by so many of these writers and these thinkers and these theologians. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And with 3 in print and a 4th in the works, this has momentum now.
Well, yeah, it does, and we're really starting to feel it now, which is both terrifying and exciting. We're starting to feel people get engaged. We're starting to reach new groups of people. We're starting to get even more submissions, and that's really cool because at the end of the day, I see Pace Journal specifically not as so much a literary project as much as kind of a museum of people's lives. And as we read through the pieces, as we look at the artwork, as we hear the poetry, I think we encounter each other. And there's something very, very beautiful about that. So as Pace Journal keeps going, I think it's just a wonderful opportunity to keep meeting people that you otherwise wouldn't meet. And that is a special way that our faith gets strengthened, and I think the Spirit speaks through those things. So there is momentum, terrifying and exciting at the same time.
Well, that is a perfect note to end on, isn't it? Ryan, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for all the good work you're doing.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for being here. Really, really lovely to spend this time with you. We do have refreshments afterwards, so stay and enjoy those and enjoy conversation. There are also issues of Volume 3 of the journal directly out the door. And the other volumes as well. No, just 3. Okay. So do go flip through those. You can purchase them there. And so please do that. Anything else we need to say as we end? Okay. Bless you all. Thanks for coming tonight.